Even without AAA budgets, some developers can still make great games.
I won't hold back!
The indie games label has changed a lot in the last few years, and without the influence of big company boardrooms, it's more open and free to explore cool new ideas or interesting visuals. That said, there are a lot of them. Like a lot. So I've made a list of 10 awesome indie strategy games I've played recently, and you should play as well. There's only one rule: no early access. As always, the lists are in alphabetical order, and I've tried to include different subgenres like RTS, 4X, city builders, etc., so there's something for everybody. Classic 90s gameplay or cool new concepts, pixel art style or complex high quality graphics, awesome single player campaigns, frantic multiplayer and powerful editors, whether on PC or console, it's all here. Maybe you'll find something that piques your interest, and if you do, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. And of course, if your favorite game isn't here, let me know in the comments. So let's dive into the indie gaming scene and talk about the 10 awesome indie strategy games you should play right now. First on the list today is Banished. It's a survival city builder that came out in 2014, and it's completely developed, except for the music, by a single guy named Luke Hodorowicz. Anyway, it revolves around a few families who left their home together with a cart of basic resources to try and make it on their own. But nobody told them how hard life on the outside could be. Banished certainly is a challenging game, as you will try to balance out food and resource production before winter comes. And even when the harshest period of the year is over, you still have a chance to get wiped out by a passing tornado or some uncontrollable fire breaks out. It's all about thinking ahead, being ready for whatever disaster may occur, and keeping hunger and cold among your little citizens to a minimum. But once you get the hang of most of the systems, and you get comfortable switching them out between jobs depending on what resources you're still lacking, that Banished can become a very fulfilling experience. And it's not the difficulty itself that makes it so pleasant to play, but rather the notion that you're playing a leader to your town, not some all-knowing, all-capable deity like in most other city builders. It's got some very decent 3D graphics as well, together with some nice background music, and the sight of your little town during a warm summer day can have a relaxing effect before you enter the cold hard days of winter, when starvation and disease come back around to remind you that you didn't produce enough warm clothes or firewoods to provide for your poor little citizens who will slowly start to die out. One of the best starvation simulators I've ever played, so you may want to try it out as well if you haven't already. It's available on PC and it costs around $20 on sites like Steam and GOG. The second entry is Bad North Jotun Edition. It's a real-time strategy game made in the Unity engine where you defend your islands from an attacking Viking invasion. They can attack from different corners, and the goal is not to let them set your houses on fire. When the attack is successfully repelled, you'll receive gold coins based on the houses that are still standing. Coins are needed to upgrade your soldiers and specialize them into swordsmen, archers or pikemen, which can have special abilities like a cliff dive stomp or a hail of arrows as well. You can also find more commanders who have a small army of their own, and when you successfully defend their island, they'll join your troops so you can upgrade them as if they were your own. The game has some roguelike features like random items to find, which can do all sorts of things, from increasing an army size, to increasing the amount of gold you get from houses, to using an army twice in one turn on the overhead map. These features increase the replayability a lot, and like other roguelike games, it doesn't have to end when you see the end credits after you beat the game. Go for another run in different strategies, and Bad North can keep you occupied for quite some time. It's available for $15 on PC, as well as PS4, Xbox One and Nintendo Switch, and there are even versions for iOS and Android devices. Also, there's a demo available if you want to try it out, which is always a plus in my book. The third game is Defcon, Everybody Dies. And this is a bit of a special one. First off, it has been released way back in 2006, around the time indie games started to gain traction with broader audiences. And second, it's not really a game in the most traditional sense, but serves more as a statement against nuclear weapons in general, with studies being done on what effect the game has on the average people's views on nuclear war. On the other side, with that subject matter, it's perhaps too much of a game, as the visuals resemble what the general public pictures when they think about the war rooms that will govern nuclear war if it were to break out. They resemble scenes from films like War Games or Dr. Strangelove, with sharp vector graphics for your forces and the world map. Everybody dies is certainly a very effective tagline, and it's even implemented into the game's mechanics. It starts out with you positioning your forces around the globe to be able to harness as much deaths as possible once the doomsday clock strikes midnight and Defcon 1 is announced. Nukes start flying everywhere, and players only have one objective: destroy as much of the enemy's population as possible, while having as little of one's own population destroyed as possible. A typical game will see civilian casualties numbering in the millions, and it can really get you thinking about this sort of stuff. As a game, it's very streamlined with no unit production, resource collection or technology upgrades. Position carrier fleets, submarines, atomic bomber airfields and long-range ballistic missile launching sites and counter systems, and wait for the Defcon clock to count up. Every level brings more possibilities for deployment, and once Defcon 1 hits, the game proceeds until 80% of the total number of nukes has been launched or destroyed. Then a victory countdown will begin, and the final score and the winner are announced when it runs out. The game can host up to 6 human or AI players, and features local and online multiplayer, and alliances can be formed, broken or renegotiated in-game. It's available on PC for $10, comes with an insane kill-death ratio, and I would recommend everyone to try this one out if you have the chance. The fourth entry on the list is Into the Breach, a roguelike turn-based tactics game about giant monsters invading the Earth and humanity trying to counter these invasions with equally giant mechs. We also invented time travel to give pilots the opportunity to go back in time and start the whole conflict over should the worst happen. You command a squad of 3 of these mechs to try and stop the aliens, called the Vex, from advancing through 4 different island stages with the ultimate goal of destroying their hive. It's a game with an emphasis on deterrence and creatively mitigating damage with the limited tools at your disposal. Luckily, you can see every action the enemy is about to take on their turn in advance, so every encounter becomes a sort of puzzle when you try to push enemies into each other's firing ranges or on top of one of the spawn points where another Vec may emerge from the ground. Every battle takes place on an 8x8 grid filled with impassable squares, so decisions can be reached quickly, and momentum rarely comes to a standstill for long. What also makes these decisions so entertaining to consider is the certainty of how they will interact. Attacks will always connect and do a distinct amount of damage. The transparency and amount of information you're given provide a kind of peace of mind, since every action you take will go as planned. You can unlock 8 different pre-made squads with 3 unique units and their own style of combat. You also have a choice of starting pilot with a unique trait to randomize each run. The roguelike structure continues with procedurally generated trials and permadeath, but when a campaign goes south, not all is lost. If a mech is destroyed in battle, it will return in the next, but without its pilot and unique trait. Too much collateral damage against civilian buildings means a game over screen, but it also means you have the chance to send one of your living pilots, experience points and bonus traits intact, back in time to be captain of a new squad in a new campaign. The game is difficult, but starting over isn't tiresome, because your actions so directly determine the outcome and you feel like you can always improve. It topped many a Game of the Year list when it came out in 2018. You can find it on both PC and Nintendo Switch for about $15. The fifth game today is Loria, an RTS and homage to the classic Warcraft games from the 90s with a modern spin on control. I played both Warcraft 2 and 3 back in the day, so the 15 or so hours I spent with this tribute to Blizzard's masterpieces were a pleasant journey to the past. The graphics and mechanics resemble Warcraft 2 most of all, although there is a lack of naval units in the game. Warcraft 3's influences come in the form of hero units which level up and equip items, and an upkeep system, although it's not as harsh as the one from Warcraft 3 was. The campaign is split into 2x8 missions for the 2 factions, the Order and the Chaos. It has a good, although not great fantasy story, but it serves its purpose of keeping you interested throughout the missions. Voice work is equally decent if you don't mind the fact that it's basically all covers from original sounds, same as with the music. It helps in keeping the nostalgia feelings flowing though, so that's a plus.
You're never one to change. Go on.
Skirmish mode and a level editor are also available to play around, and Steam Workshop support is integrated as well, so you can download or upload community maps at will. One big absence is multiplayer, but according to the developers' websites, they are working on implementing it at a later date, so I'm keeping my eye on it for that, especially with the state the Warcraft 3 Reforged game is in right now. While we wait for Blizzard to fix Reforged, if they even can and want to, that is, maybe you can try out Loria instead for your nostalgia fix. It's available on PC, and sites like Steam and GOG will charge around $11 Renos for it. There is a demo available as well, so you can try the first few missions before you buy it. For number 6 on the list, I have Mutant Year Zero: Road to Eden. It's a tactical turn-based game with battles which play similar to the battles in the rebooted XCOM series. It integrates stealth mechanics as well to mix things up, and these systems all go quite well together. Getting the drop on your opponents and scouting out an area before you attack is almost necessary, as Mutant Year Zero can be quite a challenging experience, even on the lower difficulty settings. But if you learn the way it wants to be played, and are finally able to set up and execute that perfect plan that you worked out, it can be oh so satisfying to play. It's running on the Unreal Engine 4, so graphics are an absolute highlight, but all the different game sounds and music are also of very high quality. Presentation wise, Mutant Year Zero does not disappoint. The world in which it's set is also quite interesting, with the first 2 playable characters you'll meet being a mutated duck and boar. Enemies also are mutants, so expect to see some creative designs for the monsters you'll be facing as well. Story-wise, it's a little bit more on the bland side of the spectrum, but you won't be playing this for the story, but for the excellent tactical battles. As I mentioned, the learning curve can be quite steep, especially if you don't have a lot of experience with the genre. But with a little bit of persistence and willingness to try out new strategies, you'll see its challenges are hard, but not impossible. It's one of the best turn-based tactical games I've played in the past few years, and advances the genre with the introduction of stealth and seamless exploration. Don't let a few small issues block you from getting this game if you're a fan of the genre, as Mutant Year Zero: Road to Eden is well worth your time and money. It's available on PC as well as the PS4, Xbox One and Nintendo Switch for about $35, has a demo you can download to try it out, and it also has an extra DLC campaign available if you just can't get enough. Game number 7 today is They Are Billions. It's got quite a lot of coverage already on YouTube and Twitch when it entered early access. Borrowing and expanding on the mechanics of a popular StarCraft 2 mod, it offers an almost perfect gameplay loop, mixing tower defense with city building and exploration as you balance resource management, defense and offense against the hordes of undead that are populating the randomly generated maps in survival mode. A timer counts up, and ever-growing hordes of undead will come to pay you a visit at regular pre-timed intervals. Fending off these attacks and preparing for the next one is your number 1 priority, but keep in mind that the bulk of the enemies will test if you've built your defenses adequately at day 100. A message will flash "They are billions", and hordes of undead will descend upon your base and defenses, trying to get a bite out of you and the delicious survivors you're trying to rescue. Tight controls, which remind me a bit of Age of Empires or StarCraft, make it a very enjoyable experience, and there's plenty of resource gathering, technology research and building construction to be done. Your defenses are the most important buildings, and you can count on a wide variety of traps, towers and walls to help you in your fights. Matches can take a couple of hours to complete, so it's an ideal game to waste an evening or even a weekend on. There's also a campaign available, although I didn't play it for very long, as I get the impression it tends to forget about the gameplay loop the survival mode is based on, and as a result it feels rather weak. In essence, you could say They Are Billions is based on just a single trick, but it's a hell of a trick, which will keep you saying to yourself, I'll try just once more and maybe do this and this instead. If you buy this game, do yourself a favor. Don't look up any building orders or anything like that, as most of the enjoyment comes from figuring this stuff out for yourself. It's available for $30 on PC, PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, although I only looked at the PC version and don't know how the console versions hold up, because the controls on PC are standard RTS controls, and consoles don't tend to do these very well. Well, except for our next entry on the list, that is. And that's Tooth&Tail. Our 8th game is a charming little RTS game with some interesting visuals and fast action-packed gameplay. It tosses out a lot of the more complex elements from traditional real-time strategy, in favor of a more minimalist, streamlined approach. No complex tech trees or fast APM skills here. The only resource is food, and the only unit you directly control is your commander. With this commander, you issue orders to your troops, capture gristmills for food production and build unit production buildings. You don't even take direct control of your armies. Instead, you use your commander to call out certain types or all units onto a place on the battlefield, and then they automatically start attacking or patrolling. This makes Tooth and Tail a very accessible RTS, one that even works quite well on console. It has an enjoyable story mode, which can take the better part of 8 hours to complete, with a great story to boot. It's been quite a while since an RTS's story entertained me this much, and the game is well worth it for the single player campaign alone.
Those who fall will be denied.
It also serves as a tutorial of sorts for the first few hours, but later missions can be quite hard to pass and require some critical thinking and planning if you want to beat them. Multiplayer is quite enjoyable as well, with randomly generated maps and quick matches lasting no more than 15 minutes before a victory is achieved. At the start of the match, you choose 6 units out of a pool of 20, but there is already much to think about. Do you want cheap fast units or pricey tank types? How about your defenses? And should you bring any hero units? This forces most strategies and game plans to be formed before the match even started, something that most veteran RTS players always advise the newcomers to the genre. Careful economy management is also integrated into the gameplay, with farms running out of resources quite fast, so the need to push forward is always around the corner. Tooth and Tail certainly came as a surprise, and it's nothing like I expected, but that's what makes indie games so interesting to me. Oh, and did I mention it has split screen couch play? Certainly worth your time, and available on both PC and PS4 for $20. Entry number 9 is Wargroove, a turn-based game inspired by the older Nintendo Wars and Advance Wars series. It's pretty close to the look and feel of Advance Wars in particular, although it's fantasy themed instead. Its gorgeous pixel art combines it with challenging and extremely fun tactical combat, and a level editor strong enough to make your own campaigns, even including cutscenes like the ones you would see in the campaign. The different factions are visually distinct but have access to the same units except for the commanders, who each have a unique ability called their groove. Each unit has other units they're weak and strong against, and it's a satisfying tricky task to try to adapt to what your opponents are doing. Critical hits are determined by positioning rather than luck, so movement is a lot more nuanced than simply marching forward. The AI is no slouch either, as I found it wasn't easily baited into the traps I set up for them. And winning a decisive battle as you dance around your units just outside its attack range before you finally find that opportunity you were looking for to attack or counter makes it very enjoyable and satisfying to play. Battle animations are super cool to watch, with lots of little details depending on the terrain or the combatants. After a while they start to get old, but you have the option to skip these for a more fluent gameplay experience. Wargroove comes with an extensive and challenging campaign, an arcade mode in which you have to battle on 5 random, symmetrical, increasingly difficult maps, a puzzle mode in which you have to solve a battle within 1 turn with the units you're given, and then there's the multiplayer and editor modes. As I mentioned before, you could easily recreate the entire single player campaign in this editor, and there's already tons of campaigns made by people 1,000 times more creative than me, so you can spend hundreds of hours on the single player alone. And multiplayer is equally impressive. Co-op or versus matches, internet, local or hot seat play with up to 4 players, cross-play between PC and the different consoles, except for the PS4 sadly, asynchronous play, everything you could ever wish for in a turn-based multiplayer strategy game is here. Simply put, Wargroove is the Advance Wars successor its long neglected fans have been waiting for, while adding in a ton of extras and modern improvements. It's available on PC, PlayStation 4, Xbox One and Nintendo Switch for the low price of $20. And last but certainly not least, we have Warhammer40K Gladius Relics of War. Although the title is a mouthful, the game itself is rather simple if you look at it from a distance. It tries to blend 4X gameplay and wargame strategies with the universe of Warhammer 40k and accomplishes this quite well. The lore of the universe helps it out a bit, as in the grim darkness of the far future there is only war. Which means there are no trading or diplomacy options to be found other than team setups at the start of a match. It plays a bit like a Civilization clone, but if Civilization had a simpler tech tree and no way to negotiate with the enemies. That said, it's quite impressive what a 3-man team has done with some good graphics, sounds and music. The only thing missing is voice acting for the units like Dawn of War has, but then again, it's only an indie game. The base game gives you 4 races: the Space Marines, Orcs, Necrons and Imperial Guard, here called Astra Militarum, to play with or against, and DLC packs lets you add in the Tyranids and Chaos Marines as well. And word around the water cooler is that the Tau may be joining the roster in the near future. So that's quite a diverse cast of minions to play your wargames with. Each of these factions comes with different technologies, units, buildings, resource managements and strategies, all in line with the lore of Warhammer 40k. Astra Militarum, for example, can spit out troops and far-hitting tanks like no other, while Space Marines rely more on their superior technologies and can apply some powerful buffs to their already strong forces. Each faction has pros and cons like this, and starting up another campaign on a new seed-generated map with all different options for wildlife and terrain features adds a lot to this game's replayability. The AI can put up quite a fight, and at the early to mid-game stages of the game, even the normal neutral wildlife can pose a serious threat to your troops. Multiplayer is what makes this game a must-have though, and it's so much fun setting up matches with or against your friends and the AI. Gather a few mates on a Discord channel and have at it. When I first heard that a smaller indie studio was making the first ever 4X type Warhammer 40k game, I was a little worried, but man, did these guys prove me wrong. I've got about 50 hours on this game, and it's safe to say that it does have a lot of that one more turn magic great 4X games usually have, without being a true 4X game. Nevertheless, don't let that spoil any of the fun this game offers. It's yours exclusively on PC for $40 if you just want the base game, and $15 per faction DLC. Honestly, it can seem quite pricey for an indie game, but trust me, it's well worth its asking price. So that's it for my list of indie strategy games worth checking out. I know there's a lot more indie games out there, but don't worry, I've already started work on a second list, so keep an eye out for that. Now tell me, did you play any of the games on here? What's your opinion on them, and what was your favorite one? Any game we talked about today you haven't played but piqued your interest? Or is my opinion trash and did I leave out your favorite indie strategy game, Game X, the greatest game of all time? Let me know in the comments below. I'm all for friendly discussion and maybe I'll include it in the next video. Speaking of the next video, be sure to check out some of the other ones on the channel and maybe give them a like. Your choice, no obligations. So that's it. End of the video. Thank you for watching and see you next time. Peace!